So I'm going to go ahead. It's 10:02, and I know that we probably all have stacked up busy days. So let me just start by saying good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. I really I'm so happy to be able to welcome everybody here today for what will be the first of many virtual events that Outdoorsy will be hosting, supporting our community of both RV and trailer owners as well as renters. I was going to talk about this a little bit down further in the housekeeping items, but let me bring it up to the top and ask if everybody could notice their mute button, please. I think we have tried to automatically mute everyone to make it easier, but if I could just ask everyone to be mindful to keep mute on during the discussion so that we can avoid any of the background noise, that would be great. I think we started off by saying we're experts in RVs and RV travel, but we're not experts in Zoom yet. So I'll try to mention that as we go along today. But thank you very much and welcome to everybody for joining us. As I said, these are definitely unprecedented times for the entire world. And we want to start by extending our support to everybody who's been affected by COVID on both a personal and also business levels. The backbone of the Outdoorsy community has always been our recreational vehicle owners. And so we wanted to start with our first virtual event today, focused on the information needs of our owners. Many of you, whether you own personally or a business focused on motorized, trailer, camper van, or rental businesses, are definitely experiencing the feelings of uncertainty around your rigs and travel. We've heard from hundreds of our owners all across the US and the country, questions like they've been wondering, what good is our RV now? Is it still worth it to keep renting on this platform? Can I afford to keep my RV? Will I still continue to get RV rentals or have a business in the future? All very reasonable and good questions. So we wanted to make sure that everybody feels confident in the future, and we wanted to be able to bring to you today a group of experts from the RVIA Industry Association, a couple of individual mid-sized rental companies and destination businesses like Harvest House to share their insights on what the future of the industry and road travel might look like as we look on the other side of COVID-19. We're going to start the discussion today with our prepared topics. I think you would have all received the email and the invitation, but we're going to make sure we open up the conversation to answer as many questions from you guys as we can get to during the time we have today. We know that everybody is pretty hyper-focused on losing the rental income for the months for these last few months. And we want to be able to provide some insights on what the bigger picture looks like for travel in the summer, as well as some specifics that you can also do today. So the topics that we're going to cover are just the basics of the reality of COVID-19 and how individual RV owners and camper van rental companies are navigating during this time with regard to their bookings, maintenance of their vehicles, etc. We're going to also talk about how the travel industry will change as a result of COVID-19 and why that'll be beneficial for road travel in particular and a lot of the camping destinations. We're going to talk about some of the ways that you could prepare or adopt new travel technologies and what RV travel will look like using these technologies. We're going to spend some time focusing on local RV travel and what that means, camping close to home. Is it going to surge? Will we see a rise of local travel? And then we're going to end the conversation today focusing on RV travel trends and the importance of nature. So before we dive into some of these questions, if you have a question during the conversation and you'd like me to ask one of the panelists or have it answered for you, please email to panels@outdoorsy.com, or you can, in that chat function on the bottom window of your Zoom screen, you can send the question via Zoom, and our Outdoorsy marketing team is here to facilitate, take those questions in, and we'll make sure at the end of the conversation that we ask the panelists here today and they can give you direct answers. One last note about the muting. I know it's challenging getting all the IT to work, but please make sure that you notice if your mute button is on, and that way we can avoid any of the background noise here today so we can focus in on the answers. Awesome. So I'm excited to be able to announce who we have with us today. We talked a little bit about that at the beginning. We have 4 fantastic panelists. I'm going to start by introducing Karen Redfern. I've known Karen for a few years now, as I tried to stay very close to the RVIA in the beginning days of when we were launching Outdoorsy. I have a lot of respect and admiration for what the industry puts out and how they support owners of all kinds and travelers of all kinds, whether you own a vehicle, want to rent a vehicle, try one out before you buy it. She's been the Vice President of Brand Marketing and Communications for RVIA. So she leads the team responsible for the industry's brand marketing campaign, GoRVing, which I'm sure you're all aware of. She covers everything from consumer trends and research, developing the strategy, and then working out all the communication, advertising, social, and digital media channels to be able to bring those campaigns to you today. She's got a massive background in PR and marketing spanning three decades, and has a lot of really valuable insights that I've been leaning on in the past few weeks. So I'm excited for her to be here today, and I'll just let her wave and introduce herself quickly so you can place a name to a face.
Thanks so much, Jen. Really excited to be part of this. And, you know, I have been part of the RV industry for over 3 decades because it is such a wonderful lifestyle. And it certainly is something my children grew up doing it. And it's something that I just am very enthusiastic and passionate about. So glad to be here and try to talk everyone through these crazy times.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. I'll next introduce Joel Holland. Joel is he's a well-renowned entrepreneur. He's an owner of Harvest Hosts, which is a membership club for RVers. They offer free camping at over 1,000 wineries, breweries, distilleries, farms, golf courses, museums, and other unique attractions. Aside from being a pretty avid RVer himself and building this business, I'd like to give him some props. I'm sure he wouldn't boast himself, but he was named one of the top 25 entrepreneurs under 25 by Businessweek magazine, Young Entrepreneur by the U.S. Small Business Administration, and recognized as 30 under 30. So he's definitely a trailblazer in terms of building a destination solution for everybody wanting to travel in an RV. He's based in Vail, Colorado. I believe it's snowing actually in Vail, but I'm gonna give him a minute to introduce himself so you can place a face to a name.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, it's great to be here. I appreciate the introduction. It's very kind of you. I'm not that young anymore, but I still do really love, I love entrepreneurship and love RVing. And my wife and I before we got into Harvest Hosts, we RV'd through all the lower 48 US states, fell in love with this world. And so like you, we are very antsy right now to get back on the road. We're antsy and optimistic. I think that the worst has happened. And I think very soon, especially for RV travel, I think things are looking pretty good. So I'm excited to be a part of today's discussion, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Joel. I know everybody's going to look forward to the insights that you bring today. Appreciate your time. Next, the next 2 panelists that we have with us today are really at the heart of the outdoorsy marketplace in terms of owning many trailers and camper.
Lost your audio.
Cannot hear you.
We lost you, Jen.
No.
Lost your audio.
It looks like we lost Jen real quick. Mike, if we could have you introduce yourself, we'll just keep this going.
Sure, no problem. I'm Mike Jackson with Southwinds Rentals here in sunny Tennessee. And we've been with the Outdoorsy for now 3 years and just loving it. A great platform. After experimenting with other platforms, just love Outdoorsy wheelbase. We started the business, our business, with just one camper, our personal camper, and just grew. And now we have a variety of different.
Listen to this webinar.
Now we do a variety of different campers, and so we're just moving forward and glad to be here on the panel today.
Thanks so much, Mike. If everybody could just mute your screens, there we go. And then we have one more great RV partner, Deborah Kane, if you would introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I just scrolled through all the screens. What a thrill to see so many people with us this morning. I'm Deborah Kane. I am the founder of a camper van rental company out in the Pacific Northwest called GoCamp. And just like Mike, we started with one camper van, my own personal van. And I think it was back in 2017, I discovered Outdoorsy. I threw my camper van up on the Outdoorsy website, and probably about 2 hours later, I had a 3-week booking. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is good. This is for real. And the other thing that I noticed on the Outdoorsy website back in the day was a little icon, little badges on some of the profiles. And I thought to myself, I want a badge, you know, motivated by stickers, just like my kids. And so after a little bit of exploration, I realized that the badges were for folks who were pro dealers or people that were using Outdoorsy's Wheelbase professional fleet management software. So pretty quickly, I decided that that was exactly what I wanted to do. And the GoCamp fleet is now at about 85 camper vans. So excited to share some insights and perspectives with everyone this morning.
Thank you, Deborah. It was great to see a familiar face, and hopefully everybody can hear me rejoining the call. Thumbs up. Okay. Wow, technology is was our friend yesterday. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I appreciate, Andrea, you making the segue for Mike and Deborah, and thank you to both of you guys for joining. Okay, so let's get into some of these topic discussions. I wanted to start by just saying, when we first started Outdoorsy, we also faced a lot of obstacles. There really wasn't a marketplace that existed. We started with a simple idea on a whiteboard, and we got a lot of no's saying it would never work. How could we figure out insurance? How could we do safe payments? It was pretty challenging. But we feel like it really isn't any different from the new obstacles in front of us today. We built a brand that's welcomed more than 17 million people to the site in just the last year alone, and 2 million days of booked vacation travel were made in just the few short years that we've been around. And the reason why that's been successful is because of this incredible community of our owners and our renters, and also a lot of leaders within the RV industry, like our panelists here today. So I want to start by saying, as we get into the conversation, that we believe the future is bright for RV travel and camping, and we know that we're going to do this together. So we're looking forward to digging up some of the challenges today and some of the positive outlooks that we can look forward to. So let's start by talking about or addressing what we're all up against in terms of today's moment and the realities of COVID. I can start by sharing with everybody that we definitely saw a lot of near-term cancellations. Most of our business over the last month decided to cancel and or consider rescheduling trips for much later in the year. We also started to see some strange changes in our booking habits. We saw a lot of bookings that were happening just 24 hours before departure. And when we leaned in and we reached out to customers to find out why customers were booking, a lot of people were using to rent a vehicle or a trailer and just like keep it at home for something to do. We also saw accommodations being rented for a lot of healthcare workers who needed to self-quarantine away from their families, which is why we launched the temporary housing program for frontline heroes. So we definitely saw some pretty big changes. But talking to our panelists here today, I'd love to start by asking Karen and Mike, what immediate changes did you see in consumer behavior, and what have you seen overall during this time of travel uncertainty?
Sure. Obviously, the vast majority of the country is in a stay-at-home order. So at this point, what GoRVing's purpose is really to get Americans excited about the idea of RVing and introduce them and ask them to get on the road and enjoy what we have to offer. But this isn't the time to be talking about leisure travel. From the RV Industry Association side, our government affairs team has been very active with working with the state and federal governments, ensuring that campgrounds are considered to be essential businesses for those people who are the full-timers. We know there are a lot of people that don't have a brick and mortar home to go back to. This is their way of life, whether it's for a few years or on a permanent basis. And then even before we started seeing this surge in RVs to help with the medical professionals, there's a large faction of nurses and doctors who are traveling medical professionals full-time. They go to small towns and areas where they're needed. So we want to make sure that all of that is covered and that we have that essential. We know there's going to be the time for us to go back to that leisure travel and start enjoying, and we're looking forward to that time, but now is not the time to encourage leisure travel. So we're pulling back on that for now.
Thank you. Mike, what was happening in your business, or what did you see were some of the immediate changes from customers?
Right, and initially what we saw in the last month and a half here in Tennessee were a lot of cancellations, and what we were doing is just giving full refunds, or we were rescheduling them for the future. And that seemed to work out well with a lot of people and put a good taste in their mouth as far as us being able to work with them and understand about their situations. Some of the state parks in Tennessee have shut down. Actually, all of them have. The individual parks that are privately owned are still operating. Some neighboring states like Georgia, they have their state parks fully open. And so if people are really getting cabin fever, want to get out, we're suggesting they go down there, but check out the park beforehand. Give them a call to make sure that they're fully open, and tell them that they're coming in out of state. We don't want our campers to get down there and find out that they can't enter the campground for whatever reason. But Tennessee loves to camp. Tennessee people, as soon as all this breaks open, they're going to get out there and they're going to go full blast.
It's great to have such a good local perspective. Thank you for that. Joel, how did this change, or what did you find that was surprising from representing more of the destinations or the location side of the business?
Yeah, you know, I think the best way to describe it is just kind of mass confusion. You know, we have over 1,400 hosts all around the country and in Canada and even down in Mexico. And the lack of uniformity state to state has been challenging, because we get these questions every day from members. Hey, are your hosts open? The answer is, depends on what state you're in. It depends on what type of host it is. And it's this very delicate balance, because like Karen said, we're not encouraging leisure travel. I think it's really important to flatten the curve and not let hospitals get overrun. So we're trying to tell people to just try to relax, stay where you are. But at the same time, there are over 1 million full-time RVers who live, on the road, and many of them are our members. And we've been fortunate that, as an example, in Florida, when Florida kind of kicked out the campers, we had members who were able to make it all the way back to the West Coast by staying at Harvest Host locations along the way. And so a lot of our hosts have been really generous to support and host RVers who are stranded. Many of them are actually, a lot of the wineries are still selling wine in a safe way. They'll just drop it off right outside the RV door, and there'll never be any contact. But I think that really we're excited for clarity on when the travel restrictions are ended, so we can get back to saying, hey, everybody's open for business. Support these small businesses. Our hosts, they're all small businesses who they're really hurting in this crisis. And so I think, that's sad. I think the positive is that what we've heard from our members is that there's a lot of pent up demand to get back on the road. And I mentioned earlier, I'm part of that pent up demand. The minute that Colorado says stay at home order is lifted, I'm jumping in our rig and I'm hitting the road. So I think that this is going to be a tough time for a little bit. And I think we'll be back to normal way before the rest of the travel industry, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's true. I also love to know that that Harvest Host was able to really provide a bit of a network for people. I love those examples of how we all have come together during this time, and you making your destinations available for people to stay. That's great. Deborah, I know for your business, it was hit pretty hard, and you saw a lot of cancellations because you're in such close contact and communication with your customers. What were some of the best decisions, or what were some of the decisions that you had to make during, or that you are making right now during times of COVID?
Sure. Well, absolutely, yes. Just like everybody else on the call, I'm sure, we saw lots and lots and lots of spring cancellations. I don't think anybody on the call had the best spring ever. So probably the worst spring ever. After we processed our cancellations, the other thing, of course, that we noticed was, in addition to getting all the cancellations, we were not getting any new bookings, right? I think very few of us are probably getting bookings for summer or for fall, even right now. And as a business owner, you have to, you just canceled a bunch of reservations. So you have to ask yourself, how am I going to minimize costs? And how am I going to generate revenue? How am I going to generate revenue in this crazy, crazy time, right? It's not business as usual. To Karen's point, on one hand, it's really difficult right now to be promoting leisure travel. So all the old tools and tricks that you used to use to promote your rigs are kind of off the table right now. You can't be telling people to, or encouraging people to plan trips when the state and national parks are closed and your state is telling people to stay home. And so, wow, what a challenge. So I sat down and I thought to myself, okay, I have to generate revenue. And I really, 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 I need the feedback. Like, I need to know whether people still want to travel. How can I give them a way to book trips in the future without committing to dates? And how can I talk about that in a way that feels comfortable given the situation that we're in? And I thought, well, in addition to generating bookings, I want to figure out how we can do something to help, right? And so yesterday we launched a little campaign called Road Trips for the Rock Stars. And in essence, what it does is we say to people, look, you can put a deposit down today on a trip that you can take in the future. If you put a deposit down, we'll give you 20% off that trip in the future. And we will also give you the opportunity to nominate a first responder for a free road trip. So we're generating new bookings and we're saying thank you to first responders at the same time. And I got to say, we launched it yesterday and the response has been overwhelming. New bookings, yes, are coming in. And the other thing that's wonderful about it is now I get to read all these fantastic stories about first responders. So best decisions I ever made: one, focus on finding a way, perhaps, if it works for you, that you can give back. Two, oh my gosh, stay positive. I know this is hard, but find a way to stay positive. And then three, work in partnership. That's the other aspect of the campaign that's been so great, is once I landed on the idea of Road Trips for the Rock Stars, I reached out to a lot of the other fleet folks that are on the wheelbase platform, so other mid-sized camper van rental companies, and asked them to join us in the campaign. And of course, Jen knows that Outdoorsy has joined it as well. Now is the time to figure out who you can work with in your area, because we're all in the exact same spot. We are all, canceling reservations and trying to figure out ways to bring new ones in. So I would encourage you to find the folks in your community that you might be able to work with.
Yep, absolutely. Positivity is definitely a theme for our conversation today, and so is feedback and partnership. I mean, Outdoorsy is in this situation to be able to bring together what we hope is the first of many informative virtual events, because we were getting such great feedback from RVIA through Karen, and also Mike and Joel through Harvest Hosts, and yourself, Deborah. These partnerships and these points of connection are what's really giving us the information to generate the ideas for what are the best practices now and what are the programs or the actions we should take moving forward. So thank you for those specifics. That was really valuable as well. So turning the corner a little bit more towards the future, I think it's important that we did talk about and address both the, how do we reduce our costs and how do we try to generate new revenue during these months of March and April, which have just seemed very, very surreal. So wanted to start by talking about the realities of COVID. But as we look towards the future and we look to how is life changing as a result of COVID, everybody here on this call must also be experiencing what I am. We're just seeing people everywhere across the US just adopt so many new technologies and rapidly change their own personal habits during this time. I think every brand we all know in America is now trying to figure out how to deliver. Everybody's left the notion of going to the gym, and we're all trying to figure out any kind of like online workout at home. Kids are now being schooled at home through video programs. I think that's going to take off in the future. And massive wide scale adoption of Zoom. You know, we're all on it here today. I was just reading this morning that Zoom already had a huge customer base. They had 10 million users, but just in the last 8 weeks, since we really all learned about COVID-19, their users or customers have skyrocketed up to 200 million people using Zoom. So it's just, you know, from our everyday life perspective, our habits have definitely changed. And then, of course, there's a huge focus on cleanliness. When we look at, well, what changes are we seeing in terms of camping or RV travel or the industry, one of the big things that stands out in my mind are all these virtual tours now that people are taking of state parks and national parks. And we're hearing from a lot of our campground partners like KOA or other Harvest Hosts and other smaller sites that they're already looking at how can they improve their online booking presence and process so that travelers can book an entire trip experience through their sites and sites like ours, Outdoorsy. So you're really being able to get that sort of like one-stop shop experience. We're, as a company and a brand, we're looking at how we might consider adopting Zoom for orientations or key exchanges. How do we look at what's important for cleanliness? So these are some of the topics that we've been discussing and trying to figure out how we take forward. And what I'd really love those to hear from some of the panelists and industry experts on what they think RV and camper van owners should start to do or start thinking about, or how they're already tackling this preparedness for adopting new travel technologies. I think probably starting with Deborah, I know that you and I've talked a bit about this, but could you share some of the things that you're already starting to do in terms of new technology that you can think about when it comes to a camper van rental?
Sure. When I have one that's just super simple. So pre-COVID-19, all of our checkouts were in person and over paper, right? We would exchange the contract, we'd sign with a pen, and we'd do an in-person walkthrough of the camper vans. And as we're renting them, thinking about renting them in the near term, and this was an idea that frankly came from the Go Camp van owners, a lot of them are now recording videos. So videos that do the full walkthrough and orient someone to their camper van. And they're, also giving instructions on, how and where to find the keys. So what started as a workaround to minimize person-to-person contact, I think is something that we'll use in the future, really just as a time saver at that, at the point of checkout. If we can create videos that renters can watch in advance, even before they come to check out the vans, hopefully we'll get back to saying hello in person, but the video itself, I think, is an idea that can transcend the COVID-19 crisis.
Yep. Very practical. I think we're all getting a really good education on how to use, how to make videos and how to use Zoom.
Yeah, and I would just add that, I have to say, pre-COVID-19, we shied away from videos because I personally felt like, oh, they have to be super professional. We couldn't possibly afford it. And I'm realizing they're actually better when they're homespun. So yeah, the more personal, the better.
I agree totally. Joel, would love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think from a business perspective, we're doing a lot of housekeeping and spring cleaning. And I think this is kind of like a forced period of, we've stepped back from a lot of advertising. We've stepped back from a lot of social posting because again, we're not trying to encourage a lot of unnecessary travel right now. And also the economics. I mean, our advertising costs, all of a sudden we were losing a fortune, like overnight, the second week of March. So we've kind of taken it as an opportunity. We have not laid anybody off, which is great. Instead, we're focusing on recruiting new hosts and a lot of spring cleaning, which I think every business, there's always those things that you should be doing. Now's a great time to just do them. I think as far as the RVers, for people who are renting, vehicles, we've been encouraging people to spend the time planning trips, like route planning. And so that's another thing we've been doing on the content side, creating local itineraries, really cool places that, hey, once that green flag drops and the economy opens back up, or at least travel restrictions are ended, where you're going to go. And I spend probably an hour a day with my wife planning these trips. Like, we're ready. So I think encourage your potential customers to be planning trips, maybe even help them with itineraries so that when it's time to go, they rent your unit and they jump on the road.
Absolutely. Local trip itineraries and being able to create those in a way that they can be accessed online through your site or your individual listing page is a definite top tip. Thank you for that. Karen, from an overall industry perspective, even aside from technology, what are you seeing as like the big changes that COVID will have on the future of RV travel overall?
Well, it's definitely, this virus is going to make lasting changes both to our psyche and our lives, for years to come, and maybe even on a permanent basis to some extent. And it will for travel. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to have reservations about hotel cleanliness, airlines, and other, forms of travel. And what they look at with the RV is that it becomes your own personal space. You have more control over what's happening in that space and all, but definitely from the standpoint of looking at it from the rental side for consumers, germs and disinfecting are definitely going to be on the top of their mind. So it's going to mean adopting the highest cleanliness and disinfectant programs, to be able to ensure to consumers that when they do come and pick up that vehicle, it has been cleaned. And even for those people that are within your network of them, the owners having the confidence that when the vehicle is returned from a rental, that it definitely meets that cleanliness, because it's their personal vehicle as well for a lot of folks that are, they're going to be putting their families back into it. So those are going to have some big impacts across the entire travel industry, and less of an effect when it comes down to the RVing side of it, which could be a big plus for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the first things that we tackled was, what are the CDC guidelines for cleaning? What are the products? What's the process? And how do we get that information out to all of the owners on the site? So that was a great call out. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things we've been doing is on our websites, a lot of you probably have Facebook group pages or a Facebook page for your company. And we put a little COVID-19 statement out there, reassuring people that the cleaning steps that we go through with our campers, because when they get ready to go back out there, when the green flag is dropped, like Joel said, they're gonna want to go. They're gonna want to have confidence that they're going to get into a unit that is super clean. And I think it's important to use those words, super clean, and then to stand behind them and show them what you have done. Some of the things we're doing is we had a couple rentals come back 2 weeks ago. And they said, they said, okay, you can go ahead and go inside and check it out for us. And I said, well, we don't go inside right away. We will actually let this sit a couple days, and then we will actually put an ozone machine in the door and not even enter, and let that run for about 30 minutes. Then we'll go in with masks and do an inspection so that they can get their deposit back. And then we'll go in and do super cleaning. And so when the renter comes in to the camper, we want them to smell that Pine Sol that we use when we mop the floors, the Lysol that we use in the bathrooms, and that it smells very fresh. And that we reassure them that if the camper is just coming out of winter storage and it hasn't had anyone in it, we'll tell them, hey, this hasn't had anyone in it since the COVID started. so you can rest assured. But just giving them the confidence that what they're getting and their family is going to get into a unit that has been sterilized, if you will. And that really has gone a long way with our renters.
Yeah, as Karen said, I think it's probably going to be one of the mainstays of the future for travel overall, and definitely for recreational vehicles. They're being, personal use and then also use for rentals. So those are some really good tips. I know we also picked up some of your specific tips and incorporated them in our cleaning guidelines. So thank you very much. We'll talk a little bit later in the discussion about where you can find, where everybody can find those resource pages and what are the things that they can implement and start to pick up, like some of the changes that you've made, Mike, but make that available for all of the owners on the platform. Sort of, I like keeping the theme is about moving more towards the future, because I believe the curve is flattening, and the future of travel is nearer for us than we thought. Certainly, just a few short weeks ago, it feels like it's almost within reach. So one of the things that we've heard from so many different trade groups and publications and all of the news sources and industry sources like RVIA that we have been working with closely to understand what we could look for predictions in RV travel and camping trips. One of the ones that comes top of the list is potentially a surge of trips close to home or local travel. Obviously, people will be looking to avoid crowded destinations, and then also, given the economic environment that we will find ourselves in, also looking for more affordable type vacations. So the thinking is the less further they go and the further people that they see and have to travel, the more cost that they'll save. So wondering if we could get into a little bit of a discussion about whether or not you guys agree with these local travel predictions and what you think might be driving a renewed interest in local travel. Would love to start with Joel on this subject.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. Before the COVID situation, some of the interesting stats that I had read from RVIA and some of the KOA camping reports show that a lot of RVers tend to stay pretty close to home in general, right? Within a couple hundred miles, both owners and renters, they like to go out and explore their backyard. And I love that. And I don't think anything's changed. And my wife and I found this when we traveled, there's something interesting in every single state. There's something interesting within every 100-mile radius. There's cool stuff all over this country. And we have hosts in every state. You can pretty much find a host, a winery, a brewery within a 100-mile radius, anywhere in the country. And I think that's why RVing is going to be doing really well when this thing opens up again, because we're excited to get back on the road. And it doesn't mean we have to go do a cross-country trip. We're just excited to get out of the house. We're excited to go get into a park down the street or, find an interesting location. And RVing opens that up. So I think local travel is going to be one of the saving graces for RVing.
I agree. Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think as humans in general, there's sadly, nothing like tragedy or a crisis that kind of brings us all together. And we're certainly in one of those situations that's causing everyone to become more united. Even though we're distanced, people are feeling united. They're feeling reconnected, particularly within their own households. We've seen this with other situations that have happened most recently, like with 9/11. There's kind of that resurgence of that feeling of the true United States, that everyone's in the same situation together. There becomes a little bit more of that impassioned Americana, and everyone suddenly becomes even more in tune with what the great surroundings are and the great advantages that we have in the country. And right now, we're bringing a lot of people together. Families the plus side is they're able to spend more time together. They're having family dinners together. There aren't those crazy schedules. And it's going to carry over. And so they're going to be looking to do family travel together. And it's probably going to be, once everybody gets back to work, our vacation time is going to be a little bit more limited, because even though people are working remotely, you haven't been in the office and taking that time off. So having those trips that you can take close to home, and that's the beauty of an RV, is that you just put everything in and you can go at a moment's notice. You don't have to do as much of the scheduling and logistics that you do with a lot of other vacation types. And families are going to just enjoy being together and out in the outdoors. Again, we talked about, the idea of the germs. The fresh air is the good place for people to be, and spending that quality time. And so it really does speak positively for this industry and this type of travel to become even more popular as we move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed about COVID is parents are really reconnecting with their children indoors now, because of so much time being spent in like activities that that families are rallying around. So being able to just like continue that connection, but and do that so easily, just staying within an hour or two drive from your home and being able to enjoy that time, but doing it outdoors, I think is really going to be top of mind for a lot of Americans in the coming months.
Yeah.
Deborah, your rentals cover a lot of amazing local states: Oregon, Washington, California. How are you preparing some of your itineraries for local travel?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we're focused on right now is trying to help people see home differently, right? You think, well, I don't want to go to the Oregon coast again. I go there all the time. But we're playing with what we're calling a passport program. Again, actually, going back to my earlier comments, inspired by the stickers, seeing if people might be motivated to go to the Oregon coast, not just to go to the coast, but because GoCamp is partnered with a local restaurant to host a clam bake or an oyster something, or, on Saturday, we're gonna, bring your camper van by the dock, because we've actually arranged for you to learn how to go crabbing. So we're trying to figure out how to couple the camper van rental experience with experiences in the local community. And, to Karen's point, with so many small businesses struggling now, all of us are struggling, again, back to partnerships. Are there ways that we can partner with some of those small businesses and some of those communities where our guests are most likely to go, to create a way for the trip to feel different, for it to feel special, for people to start seeing home differently?
I love those ideas. I definitely can see myself on a California clam bake local experience trip in the near future. And this is something that any owner that currently lists their RV, motorhome, trailer on Outdoorsy can start thinking about. What are the experiences and the local trips and the ideas that are just within an hour or two reach of where their trailer, their vehicle is located? I know that our product and marketing team is already working on ways that we're going to make make those experiences available for you to post on your listing pages and other places throughout the site. So start thinking about what some of those cool experience and local ideas are for you, and we'll make sure that you can promote those to help renters and travelers in the later summer months figure out where they can spend their travel dollars and travel time. Okay. So the purpose of this call was first and foremost for you guys to hear from a broad range of people across the industry, and also for you to be able to ask them questions directly yourselves. So I'm going to change gears now and move into taking questions from all of the audience and people that are joining into the call. I'll remind you again, if you have a question that you'd like answered, either just message the question in the chat field. You'll see that icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, so you can do that. Or secondly, you can email your question directly to panels@outdoorsy.com. We'll see how many of them we can get through right now. And if we can't get through all of them, we will follow up this virtual event with a Q&A document, and we also plan to carrying on more of these on a regular monthly schedule. So you'll be able to ask your question in the future too. Let me start with one of the first questions that's coming in from Water Swenson. And the question is for Mike, Deborah, and I guess Outdoorsy, so I can take that one. The question is concerns with outdoor travel and what impact it might have on the first timer experience. They pay good money to go to a campground for the pool, the playground activities, and this year it may be non-existent or much less accessible. Do you have any concerns about first-time RVers or people that never rented, again, due to poor experience? I wonder if I got that question correct. Concerns with outdoor travel and what impact it might have on the first-time experience.
I actually, one of the things that comes up for me, Jen, is Joel's program. Frankly, I was thinking about it this morning that it is true. There's a narrative out there right now that the campgrounds are closed and the national parks are closed, and that very much had me thinking about, well, where are other places that people can go and still get that fix of being outside? And Joel, I thought of your program. I thought of some of the Hip Camp locations, if folks are familiar with the Hip Camp app. But honestly, the person who asked that question makes a good point, because the other thing that came to mind for me was, well, how do we train people on boondocking, right? Like, how do we train them to go to places that are relatively unknown? And I think the person that asked the question might be right, that that's not perhaps the best fit for a first-time camper.
Hey, turn around, go up 23rd.
Go up?
Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for deciphering that question. I think you pulled out a really good insight and gave some good suggestions about other locations. Let me ask, Joel, do you have any concerns around providing a really good, solid experience for new people, like people that have never considered outdoor travel or recreational vehicle travel? Those are the hotel and the air travel type of customer. Do you have any concerns looking forward about providing an excellent first-time experience for those people?
Well, I think experience is the right word. And so I like Deborah's program of creating this passport, program, because when my wife and I rented our RV for the first time, it was before Outdoorsy existed. It was before we could actually get a really nice unit. We rented one of these boxy, terrible things that broke down halfway through the trip. It smelled bad. What we loved about the trip were all the experiences we had. And so some of the campgrounds are fine, some are utilitarian, some are great. I do think there could be an issue with pools not opening up for a while and things like that. But what we love with Harvest Hosts is that all these small businesses in our network provide some cool, unique experience. And so I'll give the example of last spring when I traveled across the country. I went to Stratica Underground Salt Museum in Kansas, and you actually get to go down hundreds of feet underground to see a live salt mine. Went to Golden Spike Tower in Nebraska and saw the world's largest train yard. And so you can actually go up and watch thousands of trains coming through. Went to Heartland Farm in Kansas, which is run by 3 nuns in their 80s. And one does massages, one creates alpaca scarves, and one makes soaps. And so, those are just a few of the examples of really fun experiences that made the RVing thing very memorable. And that's one of the reasons when I talk to friends who are looking to try RVing, I say, go on Outdoorsy, rent the perfect unit for you, whether it's a smaller class B or one of these big boys. Then go look for some campgrounds along the way, because you're not going to want to boondock the whole time, but then sprinkle in some experiences. And I think that's where Harvest Hosts comes in. Sprinkle in a couple of really fun experiences. So I think even after the borders kind of open up again, things are going to be a little slow to fully reopen, but I think there'll be ways to find great experiences for RVers.
And Jen, I think that's something we have to remember, that, the pools being closed at the campgrounds and that's going to be affecting hotels the same way. So it's not just, so the RV experience itself becomes that vacation, like Joel was just talking about. That's the positive, is when you open that door from your hotel room, you see the hotel hallway. But when you open that door from your RV, what's in front of you, you get to pick. And it doesn't necessarily have to have all the organized activities and the pool. because those things are going to be shut down for other destinations as well.
That's a great point, Deborah. I think we lost Jen one more time. So this is Andrea from Outdoorsy. I'm just going to pull from the list of questions here and ask my panelists to jump in and support those. So we've been talking a lot about cleaning procedures. How do you recommend that you don't expose yourself to too much risk when you guys are doing cleaning procedures?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the things we need to be careful of is when the camper comes back, you could let it sit a few days before you even go in it. And they say that the higher temperatures, like if you have your camper sit out in the sun for a few days and it gets very hot in there, that's supposed to help keep the bacteria down. But that's not for certain. But one of the things we do is we use the ozone machines. They're great. We bought ours, I think, for $100 a piece. You can get them, Amazon, wherever. And then also, but wear the masks. Be careful what you touch when you go in after a rental comes back. And just start with the Lysol and the Pine Sol and all those antibacterial cleaning agents you use. But just be careful. What we do is we're really careful what we touch when we go in. But at the same time, you have a renter that wants their deposit back, and I know it's a 7-day time you have. We try not to take that time. We try to get back to them right away, and as soon as possible. It's very important to them. But at the same time, we want to protect ourselves. And I want to make this point, even though you have a family that comes back that looks very healthy and they're very happy and they look like, oh, there's no sickness in this family, you don't want to take that chance. You want to go through the guidelines that the CDC has said as far as cleaning and even do an extra step. I mean, think about it. If your family is going in there, how clean would you want it? So I think that's really important to convey that.
That's a really great point, Mike. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump into the next question here. This is directed more towards Karen. Are there any new marketing messages or campaigns that RVIA is going to be considering after COVID is over to help spur some interest in RV travel?
Absolutely. We're actually, as an industry, the RVIA, the RV Dealers Association, and the campgrounds are going to be working together to have an all industry message going out to consumers. And then from GoRVing standpoint, we will be launching some new campaigns to really get to the consumers, get them thinking about RV travel, those that maybe never have. And it's going to be an all out push once we know that the vast majority of the country is able to get back on the road and enjoy what we all love to do. And we're just going to be wanting to create that want and interest with the rest of the American population. So absolutely.
That's really great. I think there's going to be some really incredible ways that the country is going to want to experience nature in a new way after this. So we're so happy that the industry is supporting this. It looks like we have time for one more question. So here's the question from Jeremy. Do any of the panelists have booking data that would suggest pent-up demand for RV travel after COVID-19? I'll look to Deborah and Mike to answer this one.
Well, data. I have personal anecdotal experience. Yesterday we were practicing this video call, and I laughed because we were getting instructions on how to mute things, and I didn't want to mute anything because my computer was dinging with a new reservation. Just in the last, I would say, 2 days, things have felt like they're picking back up for fall bookings. So we actually, we did 2 bookings yesterday, and we have inquiries out on 3 or 4 more today, but they're September, October trips, which I thought was pretty interesting. That's the current 2-day trend for us.
And for us, what we had, just for example, yesterday I had a repeat renter call me, and he's planning on coming up from Key West because he just bought a new farm here in Tennessee that they're remodeling this farmhouse from the ground up. I mean, it's just really, and he rented from me in December, and he's wanting to come up and rent for about a month and a half. And so he was, asking for availability. He wants to come up around May 1st. And so and I didn't think of that really, but people are wanting some RVs or campers for that temporary kind of housing thing that is going on now in our country. And you can even suggest that in your advertising, if you advertise on Facebook or Google or whatever, in your Google posts or your Google updates for your website, you can say that, hey, there are alternatives during this time if you need a camper to be that extra housing for you, and so giving people ideas of what they can do with your campers. When this thing breaks out, it's really going to break out as far as when the green light goes. So be sure your campers are ready. Do the maintenance items that you need to do. Get those done now, because people in Tennessee, we see it right now. They're getting cabin fever. They want to get out, and they're looking at all different avenues. We suggest a lot of people go to lakes because that's the number one thing. When people say, where can I go? I'm a first-time camper. They want to go to some park that has a lake. They're very big into water sports here, fishing, boating, all that, but they want to be near the water in Tennessee. So we always suggest, and most of the campgrounds do have some kind of lake of some kind, especially the Army Corps of Engineers campgrounds. So make those suggestions. And we are, like Deborah was saying, we are getting also some inquiries about fall camping. Bonnaroo is a huge event here in Tennessee. It's kind of like a Woodstock. It goes on every year. I think 100,000 people attend it. They had it in June. They now rescheduled that for October. So those reservations for campers are now moving to October or September. I'm sorry, September. And so, that's the kind of activity we're seeing.
And
Go ahead, Deborah.
yeah, I suspect you might be wanting to wrap us up shortly here, but I want to just make sure that everyone saw Kit Wilson's note to the group. Kit saying, "Yay! During the Zoom, I got a booking." So
good.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Stay positive, everybody.
Absolutely. It was a challenge. It was a challenge for us to figure out how did we want to work through our first virtual event? Like, how are we going to get the balance right in being very realistic about the changes that we have to address, but then also having an eye to the future. And I think you guys, thank you so much. You've done such a great job in bringing a very balanced and well-informed perspective to today's call. How lucky are we that we have a team or a group of partners from representing the overall industry in Karen Redfern, and also looking at a good representation of camper van and trailers, single owners and large size businesses, and having Deborah Kane and Mike Jackson join us today. And then also Joel from Harvest Hosts, who provides such a excellent packaged experience in one through Harvest Hosts. And I know that's something that Outdoorsy is already looking to figure out how we can package up and offer as programs for renters and advertise through all of our owners on this call today and across the US. So I'd just love to say, again, thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today and sharing insights from the group. This is the first of many, and we do have now a list of things that we will work on improving both in the IT and also how we can maybe extend the panel so that there's more time left for the Q&A. Thank you to everybody for those questions. We will follow up today's session with a list of all of the Q&A that we couldn't get to and answers that we'll pull from the panelists so that you will get that information. The last thing I would say in wrapping up the call today is please look out for our COVID resources landing page. That's the main representation where we are communicating all of the resources that we have available, whether it's the CDC cleaning guidelines or great suggestions made by owners here, whether it's payment programs that our small rental companies can access, or it's connections to the Facebook owners group where you'll start to understand how we're going to tackle things like keyless exchange, cleaning processes, or what you can do today for updating your listing pages with more content like we talked about, local experiences, trip itineraries, offers to help incentivize renters booking your vehicles for end of summer or fall trips. Thank you very much. I hope everybody feels that the call wasn't too tricky in terms of the IT, and most importantly, that we can focus on the future in a time where we spend more time outside appreciating nature and being with our loved ones. Thank you very much, Karen and Deborah and Mike and Joel. A wave to you from my individual office location to each of yours. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Karen. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Deborah. We'll follow up with all of this resource, and our next one that we host next month will be improved and informative. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Any